My name is Autumn Harper, 31 years old, and the moment I pushed through the glass doors of the luxury hotel ballroom in Charlotte, I heard the laugh I'd been waiting years to silence. My younger brother's voice cut through the crowd like a blade slicing the air. Well, look who showed up. The broke little idiot actually thinks she belongs at an auction for a $35 million retail chain. My parents didn't even try to hide it. Dad gave me a slow, head-to-toe look full of disgust. Mom leaned toward my cousin and said loudly enough for half the room to hear, "She's probably here to mop the floors after the auction." I didn't flinch. I didn't respond. I just kept walking heels steady straight to the registration desk. I slid the bank letter across the counter, the one issued under Harper Capital Holdings, the legal entity they never bothered to look up. The woman behind the table looked up, eyes widening with instant recognition. "Welcome back, Miss Harper," she said warmly, handing me the sleek black paddle. "You're approved for unlimited bidding." My brother was still laughing behind me, completely oblivious that the name glowing on her screen wasn't the same broke girl he used to mock. That paddle in my hand, it was about to buy the very thing my entire family had been bragging for months that they would own, and their faces when the gavel drops. You're not going to want to miss that. If you've ever been underestimated by your own family, hit like, and comment me too, so I know I'm not alone. Subscribe to see exactly how shocked they were when I raised that paddle 35 million just once. Turn on notifications because this story is only just getting started. 20 minutes until the auction began, and I slipped into a shadowed corner beside a tall marble column where the crowd couldn't quite reach me. I had spent the last 13 years making sure nobody from my past could track me down unless I allowed it. At 18, right after graduation, my dad called me into the living room, arms crossed, voice flat. "We're done carrying dead weight. Pack whatever you need tonight and get out." Ryder, 15 and already taller than me, leaned against the doorframe with that same smirk he still wears today. "About time we got rid of the parasite," he said loud enough for the neighbors to hear if they'd been listening. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I walked upstairs, filled one single suitcase, took the $237 I'd hidden in an old shoebox, and left before the sun came up. Caught the 5:10 Greyhound out of Raleigh with nothing but a cheap phone and a promise to myself that I would never again depend on anyone who could throw me away. The first 3 years were brutal. Double shifts waitressing in an all-night diner off Peachtree, smelling like fryer oil and desperation. I slept on a futon in a studio the size of a closet, took finance classes at the community college at 6 in the morning, then worked until 3 a.m. Every dollar in tips went straight into an account labeled Independence. I ate ramen, wore the same 3 uniforms, and never missed a single class. By 24, I had saved $93,000 and spotted my first real opportunity, a 6-store local clothing chain in receivership. I bought it through a newly formed LLC. Nobody could connect to the girl who once got kicked out of her own house. 18 months later, I flipped it for just over $1 million. That was the moment I knew distressed fashion retail was my battlefield. I kept every victory silent. Changed the operating entity to Harper Capital Holdings so my real name never appeared on public filings. Built a track record the industry started whispering about, but never loud enough for North Carolina to hear. At 27, I closed my first 8-figure deal, a failing 22-store brand out of Dallas that every big fund had walked away from. I restructured the debt, refreshed the designs, tripled foot traffic in 14 months. Private equity partners began calling me directly. My team grew to 12. My reputation grew faster. By 29, I had quiet offices in Midtown Atlanta and West Hollywood, a 7-figure carry every year, and a personal net worth that would have made my old family choke if they'd ever bothered to check. I never updated my address with them, never accepted the random Facebook requests, never answered the one birthday text Mom sent when I turned 25. After that, nothing. Ryder got married at 26 and mailed me an invitation like the past had never happened. I dropped it straight into the trash unopened. Dad's menswear business started bleeding cash 5 years ago. I watched from the sidelines as the banks closed in. 3 years back, I quietly bought the senior debt on their flagship store through a blind trust. They still have no idea the new landlord sending those default notices is me. 10 years of sleepless nights terrified I would fail and prove them right. 10 years of turning every single insult into rocket fuel. 10 years of building something so solid that today in this ballroom, I held more liquid capital than every other bidder combined. And the asset on the block today, Evelyn Rose, 21 luxury stores, 35 million at fire sale value. The exact chain my family had been bragging for months would finally put the Harpers back on the map. They thought they were walking in to save the family legacy. They had no clue the only person in the room who could buy it outright without breaking a sweat was the same daughter they threw away 13 years ago. The house lights dimmed. The auctioneer stepped up to the podium and tapped the microphone twice. It was time. The single chime cut through the low buzz of conversation, and everyone moved quickly to their seats, like the room had suddenly snapped to attention. My family had claimed the absolute best table front row center, the one closest to the stage, where every camera and every eye would naturally land. Dad sat ramrod straight shoulders, squared fingers wrapped so tightly around his white paddle that the edges left red marks on his skin. I knew exactly why he looked that tense. He had refinanced the Myers Park house down to the last penny, convincing the bank to give him a $26 million line, secured against the equity, nothing more. Mom sat beside him, clutching her designer clutch, like a life raft, repeatedly smoothing the same invisible crease on the leather, the same nervous habit she'd had every time money got tight when I was growing up. Ryder sprawled in his chair like he already owned the entire chain legs stretched out under the table paddle, resting casually on one knee, a smug half grin permanently glued to his face. Hayden, my cousin, sat on his other side phone, glowing in her hand, scrolling with one thumb while her lips stayed curled in that familiar, superior smirk she'd worn at every family gathering since we were kids. The auctioneer stepped to the podium, tall, silver-haired voice, deep and confident, the kind that instantly commanded a room. Ladies and gentlemen, we begin the bidding for the Evelyn Rose luxury retail portfolio, 21 prime locations across the Southeast, opening at $15 million. Paddles shot up faster than I expected. $16 million from a Miami hedge fund group in matching navy suits. 17 from a private buyer out of Dallas wearing a cowboy hat and a Rolex. 18.5 from an older couple on the left side who looked like they'd done this 100 times. 19.5. The energy crackled. 20 million came and went in under 90 seconds. The Miami group pushed to 21. Dallas countered at 21.5. 22 million, and the older couple finally dropped out with a polite shake of their heads. Dad raised his paddle for the first time, voice steady but louder than necessary. 22,500,000. A low ripple of surprise moved through the room. That was a big jump for a family table. Ryder twisted halfway around in his seat, spotted me in my corner, and let the grin spread slow and vicious across his face. He leaned toward Hayden, making zero effort to lower his voice loud enough for the three surrounding tables to hear every word. Just wait. In about 2 minutes, security's going to walk right over and ask the freeloader for proof of funds. I can't wait to watch them march her out in front of everybody. Hayden didn't even glance up from her phone, just let out a short, sharp laugh and nodded. A few strangers turned to look at me, eyebrows raised, some amused, some curious, one woman even covering a smile with her hand. I didn't move a muscle, paddle still resting untouched on my lap, face completely neutral. Dallas came back strong. 23 million. Dad's jaw tightened. A thin line of sweat appeared at his hairline. He lifted the paddle again. 23,500,000. The auctioneer acknowledged with a quick nod. Miami hesitated, then folded. Only Dallas and my family remained. Dallas pushed again. 24 million. Mom's hand flew to Dad's arm, squeezing hard. Dad waited a beat, glanced at Mom, then raised the paddle one more time. 24,500,000. The room went noticeably quieter. That was serious money for a private bidder. Dallas held eye contact with the auctioneer for a long 3 seconds, then slowly lowered his paddle and sat back. Mom let out a tiny, excited gasp. Dad's shoulders dropped a fraction, the first sign of relief. Ryder spun fully around now, staring straight at me, mouthing the words "told you so" with exaggerated slowness, exactly like he used to do when he thought he'd won some petty teenage argument. The auctioneer scanned the room one final time, voice ringing clear. $24,500,000 going once. The air felt suddenly heavier, every breath in the ballroom held at exactly the same moment. Only 3 bidders remained, and the silence that followed was so complete I could hear my own heartbeat. The auctioneer's voice rang out steady and final. $25,500,000. Going once. Dad's paddle was still raised from their last raise, hand trembling violently. That 25.5 was every last cent they had squeezed out of the Myers Park house, the second mortgage, the home equity line, every favor called in. Mom's manicured nails were buried so deep in Dad's forearm I could see the skin turning purple. Ryder's earlier smirk had vanished completely. His eyes were wide, flicking between the stage and me like he was trying to wake up. Hayden had finally set her phone face down, both hands now gripping the table-edge knuckles bone white. Going twice. I raised my black paddle for the first and only time that day, calm, deliberate, no drama. 35 million. The number hit the room like a bomb. Every head in the ballroom snapped toward me at once. 50, 60, 80 people turning in perfect unison. A woman in the front row gasped so hard her pearls rattled. A man near the back let out a stunned "Jesus Christ" before catching himself. Phones lowered. Conversations died mid-word. The auctioneer's gaze locked on paddle 47. For half a heartbeat his composure cracked. Recognition, then pure adrenaline flashed across his face. He recovered instantly, voice rising with unmistakable thrill. "We have $35 million from paddle 47. Do I hear 35.5, 35.5 anywhere?" Dead silence. Not a breath. Not a twitch. Dad's face drained of all color so fast I thought he might collapse. His paddle slipped from his fingers and clattered onto the table. Mom's mouth opened again. No sound came out. Her hand flew from Dad's arm to her throat like she was choking. Ryder shot to his feet so violently his chair screeched backward and toppled with a loud crash that made half the room jump. His water glass tipped ice, and water flooding the white tablecloth running off the edge onto his $4,000 shoes. He didn't notice. He stood frozen in the puddle chest, heaving, staring at me like I was a stranger wearing his sister's face. Hayden's phone slid from the table and hit the carpet with a dull thud. She didn't move to pick it up. Her lips parted, but the only sound that escaped was a thin, broken "No." The auctioneer didn't wait long. 35 million going once, 35 million going twice. Last and final call. Sold to paddle 47, Miss Autumn Harper for $35 million. The gavel slammed down with a crack that echoed off the crystal chandeliers like thunder. For one endless second, the entire ballroom was perfectly still. Then the dam broke. Whispers exploded into stunned laughter, scattered applause, camera flashes popping from every corner. People stood on tiptoes, craned necks, trying to get a better look at the woman in the simple black dress who had just ended the sale with one quiet bid. Dad dropped his head into both hands, elbows on the table, shoulders shaking. Mom stared straight ahead, eyes glassy, lipstick perfect, but face completely blank, like someone had erased her future in real time. Ryder remained standing in the puddle he'd made, water dripping from his cuff's mouth, working soundlessly. Hayden finally managed a cracked whisper. "That's Impossible. I lowered my paddle slowly, let the faintest curve touch the corner of my mouth. Nothing loud, nothing cruel, just the quiet acknowledgement of a moment 13 years in the making. The girl they had thrown out with one suitcase had just taken the one thing they had bet everything on. And the looks on their faces in that single perfect second after the gavel fell were worth every night I ever went hungry. Security moved toward the stage for the next lot. The crowd slowly turned back to the front, buzzing with the story they'd just witnessed. But my family hadn't moved. Not an inch. A few minutes later, I was in the narrow private corridor behind the stage, finishing the last signature on the preliminary contract with the auction manager. The door slammed open so hard it bounced off the wall. Ryder stormed in first, face crimson veins standing out on his neck. "Where the hell did you get that kind of money?" he barked, stepping right up to me, close enough I could smell the whiskey on his breath. "You don't just drop 35 million like pocket change. Tell me right now." Dad shoved in right behind him, eyes narrowed to slits, voice low and dangerous. "Don't you dare play games with us," he snarled. "Nobody pulls a stunt like that without something dirty behind it." "What is this, some loan shark deal?" Fraud Mom pushed past both of them, clutching her purse to her chest like armor, voice shaking with fury and fear. "You can't do this to your own family, Autumn. That chain was supposed to save us. How could you be so cruel?" Hayden slipped in, last arms folded tight across her chest, staring at me like I was an intruder wearing her cousin's skin. I capped the pen, handed the clipboard back to the manager, and only then turned to face them. I looked at Ryder first, then Dad, then Mom, then Hayden. One by one, slow, deliberate, letting the silence stretch until it was uncomfortable. "My company operates under a different legal entity," I said, voice perfectly level. "You never once asked what I've been doing for the last 13 years. You never cared enough to Google my name. So you never found out." Ryder took another aggressive step forward, finger jabbing the air an inch from my face. "Cut the corporate crap," he spat. "Whose money is it really? Some rich boyfriend, shady investors? You owe us a damn explanation." Dad cut in before I could answer, voice rising. "You think you can walk in here, humiliate us in front of the entire city, and just stroll away? That portfolio was our future. We had plans. We had lenders ready. You stole it." Mom's eyes filled with tears now. Real ones this time. "We're your parents, Autumn. Your blood. How could you turn on us like this?" Hayden finally spoke, voice small and venomous. "You've always hated us. You couldn't stand seeing us finally get ahead, so you had to destroy everything." I let the silence sit for another beat. "I didn't steal anything," I said. "I bought what was for sale on an open auction floor. You decided 25.5 was your ceiling. I decided mine was higher. That's how auctions work." Ryder opened his mouth again, face twisting. "You think you're better than us now? You think money changes who you are?" "No," I answered. "Money didn't change who I am. Being thrown out at 18 with one suitcase did." Dad tried a different tone, the one he used when he needed something softer, almost pleading. "Look, we can still fix this. Family takes care of family. Bring us in on the deal. We'll run the stores together. Like it should have been from the beginning." Mom nodded frantically. "Yes, sweetheart, we'll forget all of this happened. Just let us back in." I looked at each of them one final time. "No," I said. "Just that. Nothing more." I turned to the manager, who had watched the entire exchange in stunned silence. "I'm ready for the wire instructions and the closing schedule." Then I walked past all four of them, heels clicking once on the marble floor. The door closed behind me with a soft final click. 3 weeks later, I was standing in the middle of the flagship store on Tryon Street, Charlotte, watching the installers hang the new Evelyn Rose logo in matte black and rose gold above the entrance. The place already looked completely different. Old displays gutted, new lighting installed, every trace of the previous owner erased. Local press had been invited for a small relaunch event later that afternoon. My team was everywhere. Designers, contractors, PR people, all moving with the kind of controlled chaos that happens when a brand gets a second life. The front glass door chimed. I turned and saw all four of them walk in. Dad first, then Mom, then Ryder and Hayden trailing a step behind. Their clothes were still expensive. Mom in a Chanel jacket, Dad in a custom suit. But the details told a different story. Eyes ringed with dark circles, Mom's lipstick slightly uneven, Dad's tie knot a little crooked, Ryder's shoes scuffed at the toe, Hayden's handbag last season instead of this one. They looked like people who hadn't slept properly in weeks. Mom spotted me and forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Autumn, sweetheart. She started, voice syrupy sweet, the same tone she used when she wanted something years ago. We need to talk. Privately. Can you give your family just 5 minutes? Dad nodded along, hands clasped in front of him like he was at a business meeting he already knew he was losing. We drove all the way here, he added, as if distance alone earned him points. Ryder hung back near a display rack, hands in his pockets, staring at the floor. Hayden stood beside him, arms crossed, biting the inside of her cheek. I set down the tablet I'd been holding and walked toward them slowly. The installers kept working, pretending not to notice the tension thick enough to cut. Of course, I said. We can use the back office. I led them past the construction, through the stockroom, into the small office that still smelled of fresh paint. Closed the door behind us. Mom started immediately. We've been talking nonstop since the auction, she said, reaching out like she wanted to touch my arm but thought better of it. We were wrong. We see that now. The way we treated you, it wasn't right. We're sorry. Dad cleared his throat. What your mother is trying to say is family is family. We want to put all of this behind us. Start fresh. Ryder finally looked up. Yeah, he muttered. Water under the bridge. We're good, right? Hayden gave a tiny nod, eyes flicking around the room like she was calculating how much the new fixtures cost. I let the silence sit for a few seconds. And what exactly does start fresh mean to you? I asked. Dad jumped in eager. Well, the stores. This brand. You obviously know what you're doing. We could help run things. I still have contacts in menswear. Ryder knows operations, Hayden's great with marketing. We'd be assets, Autumn. Real assets. Mom smiled wider. It could be a family business again, like we always dreamed. Ryder gave a half shrug. No hard feelings. We all win. I looked at each of them one by one, the same way I had in that corridor 3 weeks ago. They waited, hopeful, almost holding their breath. I didn't smile. The afternoon light shifted through the blinds. That same afternoon, I took the private elevator to the 5th-floor conference room, the only fully finished space in the building, frosted glass walls, long walnut table, downtown Charlotte skyline behind me. Olivia Chen, my lead corporate attorney, was already seated, navy suit, immaculate expression, neutral. 3 thick black folders waited in front of her like loaded weapons. I opened the door. Come in. Dad walked first, trying to keep his chin up. Mom followed, clutching her handbag with both hands. Ryder came next, jaw clenched. Hayden, last, eyes red-rimmed even before anything had started. I closed the door with a soft, deliberate click and took the chair at the head of the table. Olivia remained standing beside me. They sat in a row opposite us, suddenly looking very small. Mom opened her mouth to speak again, the same sugary tone she'd used downstairs. I raised one finger. She stopped instantly. Before any of you say another word, I began, voice perfectly. Even there are 2 things you need to understand. I nodded to Olivia. She slid the first folder across the polished wood. Effective today, all family relationships are legally terminated. Complete disinheritance, no contact orders, restraining filings if necessary. Everything was submitted to the Mecklenburg County Court this morning. Certified copies will be delivered to your residence tomorrow by courier. Dad's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Mom went chalk white. Ryder leaned forward like he was going to argue. Hayden just stared. Olivia opened the second folder and turned it so they could all see the top document: corporate resolution, stock transfer certificates, trustee signatures, dated 36 months earlier. Second, I continued, Harper & Sons, your old menswear company, has been 100% owned by one of my blind trusts since the day the banks were ready to foreclose. I purchased the senior debt, then quietly converted it to full equity. You kept receiving paychecks and titles because I allowed it. That allowance is now revoked. Ryder shot out of his chair so fast it rolled backward and hit the glass wall. You're full of shit. That company is Dad's legacy. Olivia tapped the signature block without looking up. Beneficial owner is Harper Capital Holdings Trust. Sole beneficiary, Autumn Harper. All perfectly legal. Hayden burst into loud, messy tears, hands over her face, shoulders shaking. You can't take our jobs. We have bills. We have lives. Dad finally found his voice hoarse and broken. You've hated us all these years. Fine. But this, destroying everything we have left. Mom reached across the table, tears streaming. Autumn, baby, please. We're begging you. Don't do this. I didn't flinch. The 2 stores Ryder manages and the marketing contract Hayden holds will cease operations in exactly 30 days. Severance will be statutory minimum only. After that, all communication ends. Ryder slammed both palms on the table. You vicious Olivia, slid the final set of documents forward, pre-drafted no contact agreements and restraining order petitions already stamped by the clerk. Sign these voluntarily, she said, voice like steel, or we file unilaterally tomorrow morning. Your choice. The room went dead quiet except for Hayden's muffled sobbing. Dad picked up the pen first. His hand shook so badly the signature looked like a child's. Mom followed, tears dripping onto the paper, smudging the ink. Ryder stared at the page for 10 full seconds, face purple with rage, then scrawled his name with a violent slash that tore the paper. Hayden signed last, barely able to hold the pen. Olivia collected every page, checked each signature, then placed them neatly back into the folders. Security appeared at the glass door, 2 guards in black suits. I stood. That concludes our meeting. They rose slowly, dazed like people waking up from a car wreck. No one looked at me. No one spoke. Security escorted them out. The elevator dinged 30 seconds later. 1 year later, I stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of my 42nd floor office in Midtown Atlanta, watching the sun set over the skyline I now helped shape. Evelyn Rose had become the fastest-growing luxury retail name in the Southeast. 38 new stores opened from Miami to Dallas. Revenue tripled in 11 months. Every magazine cover and analyst report calling it the turnaround of the decade. The flagship on Tryon Street was now the highest-grossing location in the entire portfolio, a daily reminder that the crown jewel my family had chased was thriving under the one person they once called worthless. Their story, on the other hand, had unraveled exactly as the numbers predicted. After the failed $25,500,000 bid and the immediate debt call from the bank, the Myers Park house went into foreclosure within 60 days. They sold it at auction for 40% under market value just to stop the bleeding. Dad's golf club membership lapsed. Mom's charity luncheon invitations dried up. They moved into a 2-bedroom apartment off Albemarle Road, the kind with thin walls and a shared laundry room, the first time in their lives they'd ever lived without a gate and a guard. Ryder stayed unemployed for 10 straight months. His resume, once padded with regional director titles, now read like a cautionary tale. No one in the industry wanted to touch anyone associated with the Harper name after the public fallout. When he finally landed work, it was overnight stocking at a big box store for $14 an hour. Hayden took a cashier job at South Park Mall, the same mall where she used to drop 5 figures on a Saturday. She wore the same polyester vest every shift, scanning items for customers who once attended her engagement party. I never checked on them directly. I didn't need to. Mutual contacts, public records, and the occasional industry whisper painted the picture clearly enough. Meanwhile, I poured everything into the next chapter. In March, I formally launched the Harper Rising Scholarship Fund, $10 million a year, fully endowed, targeted at first-generation college students from low-income households who showed exceptional grit. The application essay question was simple. Tell us about a time someone told you that you would never make it and how you proved them wrong. Every board meeting, every recipient ceremony, I thought of the 18-year-old girl with one suitcase and a Greyhound ticket. The fund's name carried my mother's maiden name, Harper, the one part of the family I still honored. Not because of them, but in spite of them. I never heard from any of them again. The no-contact orders held. The restraining filings stayed on standby, never needed. They disappeared from my world as completely as I once disappeared from theirs. Some nights I still wake up at 3 a.m., expecting to hear Dad's voice telling me to get out. Then I look out at the city lights from the 42nd floor and remember I never needed their approval. I never needed their money. I never needed their love. I only needed the chance they tried to take away. And now I make sure no kid who gets counted out the way I was ever has to fight that battle alone. I don't need them to recognize me anymore. I just want every child who was ever told they were nothing to have the opportunity I had to stand up, look the world in the eye, and prove exactly how wrong those people were. That's the only legacy that matters.